History often paints royalty as untouchable, draped in jewels, seated on golden thrones, commanding armies with a single word. But behind the glitter of crowns and palaces, there was a darker truth. Power could not protect them from disease. And one disease in particular haunted the royal courts of Europe for centuries: syphilis. This was not a sickness that could be spoken of openly. It carried shame, whispers, and humiliation. At a time when medicine was primitive and morality was harshly judged, syphilis became known as the Great Pox. Unlike smallpox, it did not scar the skin in obvious ways. Instead, it attacked slowly, creeping through the body, destroying the mind and leaving behind madness, deformity, and eventually death. The disease spread silently through intimacy, and in royal courts where mistresses, secret affairs, and arranged marriages were common, syphilis found its way into the bloodlines of kings and queens. And unlike ordinary people, when a monarch was infected, the consequences reached far beyond their health. It could decide the fate of entire kingdoms. Doctors of the time had little understanding of how to treat it. Some turned to mercury, a so-called cure that often poisoned patients more than it helped. Others relied on herbal mixtures or prayers, but nothing truly worked. And so many rulers were forced to suffer in silence, masking their illness as best they could while still trying to rule. The curse of syphilis did not care about crowns or titles. It struck fear even in the most powerful. The stories of those who lived with it, and often died because of it, reveal not only personal suffering, but also the fragility of empires. In this series, we'll uncover the hidden torment of 5 royals, who were believed to have been afflicted by this dreaded disease. Their stories are not only about pain and decline, but also about how their illnesses shaped history. From military campaigns that failed because of sickness, to political alliances that collapsed under suspicion. 2 heirs born weak or not at all, syphilis left its mark not just on bodies, but on nations. And while these rulers tried to keep their conditions hidden, history refuses to stay silent. Whispers in court documents, hints in medical notes, and even the strange behavior of monarchs on the throne have given us chilling clues. The disease that destroyed peasants in silence also rotted the hearts of kings. But who were these royals? And how did their secret suffering change the destiny of their kingdoms? The first story takes us into Renaissance France, to a young king who seemed destined for greatness, until a shadow crept into his life. If England's monarchs faced whispers, France's royal court endured something darker. King Henry VIII is often remembered for his marriages. But across the Channel, King Francis I of France carried his own burden. Francis was celebrated as a patron of the arts, a symbol of Renaissance brilliance. But behind the grand portraits and elegant palaces, his health told another story. Francis suffered from strange sores, fevers, and sudden mood changes that shocked courtiers. Physicians of his time diagnosed him with what they called the Great Pox, a disease sweeping across Europe with terrifying speed. Many historians today believe this was syphilis. Unlike other illnesses, syphilis did not only bring pain, it brought shame. It was whispered about in corridors, hidden under layers of royal robes, and carefully erased from official records. But rumors could not be silenced completely. This disease, once thought to be punishment from God, spread in the shadows of royal bedrooms. The king, known for his charm and affairs, may have passed it to others, and his weakened health later undermined his strength as a ruler. By his final years, he was described as a broken man, plagued by exhaustion and disfigurement, far from the glorious warrior king he had once been. What made syphilis so feared among the royals was not just its physical toll. It attacked memory, sanity, and dignity. For a king like Francis I, whose image depended on power and beauty, it was a hidden humiliation. And yet, his case was not unique. He was part of a tragic royal pattern that stretched across Europe. But if Francis I suffered in the Renaissance centuries later, another royal and emperor from Austria would endure the same disease, this time under the watch of modern doctors. And the world would witness just how far syphilis could drag even the most powerful ruler. Among the most infamous rulers in history, Ivan IV of Russia, better known as Ivan the Terrible, was a man consumed by paranoia, cruelty, and unrelenting violence. His reign during the 16th century left behind rivers of blood. But behind his terrifying reputation lies another hidden truth. Ivan may have been a victim of syphilis. Historians have long debated whether Ivan's violent behavior was simply the result of unchecked power, or whether a disease fueled his descent into madness. Contemporary accounts describe him as brilliant, yet unstable, capable of strategic genius one moment and horrifying brutality the next. He is remembered for creating the Oprachina, secret police force that unleashed terror upon the Russian people, slaughtering nobles and peasants alike under his command. But what pushed him so far into the depths of cruelty? Clues come from his physical symptoms. In his later years, Ivan reportedly suffered from severe pain in his joints, skin lesions, mood swings, and uncontrollable fits of rage. Some described him as hallucinating, prone to violent outbursts where he would lash out even at his closest allies. These symptoms align disturbingly well with tertiary syphilis, the stage where the disease attacks the nervous system and brain, leading to madness, paranoia, and violent mood swings. The strongest evidence comes from modern science. In 1963, scientists examined Ivan's remains. Using chemical analysis, they found extraordinarily high levels of mercury in his bones. At first glance, mercury poisoning seemed the cause of his instability. But mercury was also the main treatment for syphilis during the Renaissance. Doctors believed a night in mercury makes you sweat the disease away, but instead it poisoned patients slowly. This means Ivan wasn't just poisoned, he was being treated for syphilis, confirming suspicions that the disease haunted his reign. His madness left scars not just on his body, but on Russia itself. In one of his most infamous acts, Ivan struck his own son in a fit of rage, killing the heir to the throne. That single moment, whether born of temper, paranoia, or syphilitic madness, changed Russian history forever. His dynasty weakened, and Russia spiraled into what became known as the Time of Troubles, a period of chaos and famine. Behind the image of the ruthless Tsar was a man likely consumed by disease, fighting demons inside his body and mind. Syphilis, untreated and misunderstood, may have been the hidden force that turned Ivan from a calculating ruler into a tyrant remembered for his brutality. But Ivan was not alone. Another monarch, much closer to the heart of the Renaissance, also struggled with the same disease, and it would nearly destroy one of the most powerful kingdoms in Europe. Few monarchs have shaped history as dramatically as Henry VIII, the infamous Tudor king known for his 6 marriages, the English Reformation, and his ruthless consolidation of power. But behind his larger-than-life image, historians have long debated whether Henry was also silently ravaged by syphilis. By his later years, Henry's body had become a prison. He was obese, suffered from painful ulcers on his legs, and often lashed out with explosive anger. Some contemporaries whispered about his inability to father healthy sons, suggesting a hidden illness. Was it simply poor health, or was syphilis slowly corroding the king from within? The Tudor court was a world of rumors and secrets. Physicians at the time lacked both the courage and the medical knowledge to diagnose such a shameful disease in a monarch. Publicly, they blamed his condition on imbalances of humors, but private letters hint that his ailments were far more sinister. His paranoia, mood swings, and violent temper fit chillingly well with the later stages of syphilis, known to attack the brain and alter behavior. Whether or not Henry truly had the disease, the suspicion itself changed how his story is told. His brutal decisions, ordering executions, discarding wives, and reshaping religion are sometimes reinterpreted through this possible lens of illness. Could syphilis have played a hidden role in altering the course of English history? The truth remains uncertain. No remains of Henry have ever been tested, and Tudor courtiers had every reason to hide such a scandal from the world. But the image of England's most infamous king, sitting on his throne while potentially carrying a secret infection, continues to fascinate and disturb historians to this day, and Henry was not alone. Across Europe, other powerful rulers were rumored to have carried the same dark affliction. Some tried to hide it, while others left behind evidence in their decline. So, who was next? The trail leads to a French king whose erratic behavior and tragic downfall shocked his people. King George IV, who ruled Britain in the early 19th century, was one of the most extravagant monarchs in history. His reign was marked by luxury, excess, and a lifestyle that drained the nation's finances. But beneath the glittering facade of palaces, jewels, and feasts, George carried a private torment. Many historians believe that he, too, suffered from syphilis, a disease that symbolized both his reckless appetites and the hidden shame of the aristocracy. George was known for his endless affairs, often with actresses, courtesans, and even the wives of his closest allies. His indulgence in drink and gluttony only added to his declining health. Reports from physicians of the time suggest that George endured symptoms consistent with syphilis: chronic pain, ulcers, and what his doctors referred to as mental agitation. As with other royals, his condition was masked behind vague medical notes. Official records rarely acknowledge sexually transmitted infections, as such admissions could humiliate the monarchy. Instead, George's failing health was attributed to gout, or dropsy, convenient terms used to protect the dignity of a king. Despite his public image as a figure of grandeur, the creator of the Royal Pavilion in Brighton, and the lavish patron of the arts, George's private life was far from glamorous. His addiction to pleasure destroyed his body and his reputation. By the time he was crowned king, his health was already in rapid decline. Contemporary accounts describe him as bloated, barely able to walk, and prone to fits of paranoia. His marriage to Caroline of Brunswick was disastrous, filled with public scandals and accusations of infidelity on both sides. This George's story reflects the double life of Victorian and Georgian royalty, dazzling on the outside, diseased within. For the public, he was the image of majesty. But behind closed doors, he was another victim of a disease that silently haunted the throne. His suffering reminds us that wealth and power offered no protection from the realities of unchecked indulgence and the spread of venereal disease. What makes George IV's case particularly tragic is how his personal weakness shaped an era. His extravagance left Britain with crushing debts, while his inability to rule effectively deepened public resentment toward the monarchy. In the end, he became a symbol not of strength, but of excess, and the hidden decay that came with it. If George IV's life exposed the costs of indulgence, the next royal story reveals how syphilis could tear apart an entire dynasty. Because in the glittering courts of Europe, this disease was not only personal, it could reshape the very course of history. In 17th century Russia, whispers about the royal family rarely reached the public ear. Illness and scandal were kept behind the high walls of the Kremlin. Yet one rumor echoed for centuries that Tsarevich Alexei, heir to Tsar Alexis, and half-brother to Peter the Great, may have fallen victim to the silent plague of syphilis. Court records describe Alexei as frail, nervous, and often confined to bed. Chronic fevers, lesions, and periods of delirium were noted in letters exchanged between foreign ambassadors. While some historians suggest tuberculosis, others point to symptoms closely resembling venereal disease. How could a young royal, destined for the throne, suffer from such an ailment? The truth may lie in the reckless culture of the Russian court. While Europe's kings flaunted their mistresses openly, Moscow's royals lived under stricter moral codes. But behind the curtains, secret affairs and arranged encounters with courtesans were common. For a prince like Alexei, exposure to these circles was almost inevitable. His condition worsened with age. By his mid-20s, he experienced bouts of insanity that left him unable to govern. Chronic pain kept him away from the court, and whispers spread that the Tsarevich was cursed. Some suggested poisoning, others witchcraft. Yet physicians of the time often noted the French disease, a term commonly used for syphilis, without ever daring to write it plainly in official records. The shame was so great that the Romanov family carefully concealed his decline, but his suffering shaped history in unexpected ways. Alexei's weakness paved the way for Peter the Great to rise uncontested, transforming Russia into a modern empire. In a cruel twist, one man's hidden illness altered the destiny of a nation. The case of Alexei reveals more than just royal fragility. It exposes how disease, especially syphilis, was buried beneath layers of secrecy, silence, and stigma. For royal courts, admitting to such an infection would have been political suicide. And so, history was rewritten to cover the truth. But the next case takes us even deeper into the shadows, where a queen's beauty, once praised across Europe, was slowly eaten away by the very disease no one dared to name. For royals, syphilis was not only a physical burden, but also a political weapon. In an age when monarchy symbolized strength, health, and divine favor, the revelation that a king or queen carried a venereal disease could shake the foundation of their rule. Whispers spread quickly, and rival courts often used these rumors to undermine power. King Henry VIII's rumored syphilis is a prime example. Whether he truly had the disease or not, the speculation was enough to tarnish his reputation. His erratic decisions executing wives, splitting from the Catholic Church, and drastically changing England's religious structure were, at times, blamed on his failing health. Some historians argue that accusations of syphilis were even weaponized by his enemies to frame him as both immoral and unstable. For other monarchs, the disease was a hidden scandal. The French Bourbon dynasty had multiple figures suspected of carrying syphilis, and enemies of the crown often exaggerated these claims to weaken the monarchy's image. Similarly, in Spain, whispers about King Charles II being cursed were fueled by his grotesque physical deformities, some of which were attributed to generations of inbreeding, but also tied, in public rumor, to venereal disease. The stigma was especially destructive because it tied royalty to sin. Kings and queens were meant to be chosen by God, examples of purity and strength. Yet syphilis was widely recognized as a disease of the brothels, associated with immorality, lust, and shame. For a monarch to be linked to it was to strip away that divine aura. And yet, rather than admit to the disease, many rulers doubled down on secrecy. They hid symptoms behind heavy makeup, controlled court rumors with harsh punishments, and used loyal physicians who were sworn to silence. But still, cracks formed. Diplomats whispered. Enemies spread tales. Pamphlets circulated in underground networks, mocking diseased monarchs as cursed and unfit to rule. The political fallout could even extend to foreign policy. If a king was rumored to be dying of syphilis, rival states might push harder in negotiations, sensing weakness. Succession crises loomed larger when heirs were suspected to be born of diseased blood. The very stability of dynasties could hinge on whether these whispers of sickness were believed. For the royals themselves, the shame was crushing. They lived in golden palaces, draped in jewels, worshipped by their subjects but behind closed doors. They feared being exposed as carriers of a disease that society despised. But how did the stigma shape the next generation of royals? And what long-lasting effects did syphilis leave on the very bloodlines of Europe's greatest dynasties? By the 18th and 19th centuries, syphilis was no longer whispered about in the shadows of medieval courts. It had become a grim inheritance of dynasties. Its spread was not confined to a single throne or kingdom. Across Europe, the disease seeped silently into the ruling bloodlines, altering the course of history. Kings, queens, and princes were not spared. Their crowns could not protect them from the cruel hand of nature. The tragedy was not only in the suffering, but also in how syphilis destabilized the politics of entire nations. When a ruler was weakened by illness, power struggles followed, heirs were contested, and enemies waited eagerly for the kingdom to stumble. The disease did not just torment bodies, it influenced wars, marriages, and the fate of empires. Whispers about rulers' health carried weight in a time when monarchy was absolute. If a king was rumored to be insane, as often happened in late-stage syphilis, it could trigger revolts. Some royal figures became infamous for erratic behavior, wild bursts of rage, strange obsessions, or sudden collapses of judgment. Historians now suspect syphilis was the hidden culprit behind these unexplained changes. And yet, courtiers and doctors alike concealed the truth, preferring to blame melancholia, madness, or divine punishment, rather than admit the shameful truth of venereal disease. The royal mask had to remain unbroken. Dynasties also tried to maintain their image through portraits. Oil paintings of rulers presented flawless skin, rosy cheeks, and noble posture. Behind these painted lies, however, were bodies ravaged by ulcers, swollen joints, and failing minds. The contradiction between the canvas and the truth reveals the desperate need of monarchies to appear eternal, even as syphilis ate away at their bloodlines. What mattered was not reality but perception. After all, who would obey a king whose face bore the sores of a prostitute's disease? But beneath a powder, perfume, and politics, the suffering was real. In letters and secret diaries, some royals left clues about their torment, the headaches that would not stop, the unhealed wounds, the nights without rest. Their voices were silenced publicly, but privately they wrote of despair. Some even feared damnation, convinced their illness was a punishment from God. As history moved forward, syphilis became a hidden force shaping who ruled and who fell. The disease was not just in the bedchamber. It was in the throne room, in the treaties signed under trembling hands, in the wars declared by unstable minds, a silent player in the theater of kings and queens. And yet, the darkest question remains. How many royal legacies, how many heirs, alliances, and nations were destroyed not by sword or rebellion, but by the slow, secret poison of syphilis? By the dawn of the 20th century, syphilis had left its bloody fingerprints across the royal families of Europe. Kings and queens, those who were seen as near godlike, were slowly stripped of their illusion of invulnerability. Their private shame was now public history. Behind the velvet curtains and golden crowns, they had been prisoners of the same disease that plagued peasants in the gutters. This truth shattered the aura of divine protection once wrapped around monarchs. The disease didn't just kill bodies, it killed dynasties. It warped bloodlines, created unstable heirs, and left kingdoms weak in times when strength was needed most. Historians now trace political instability, wars of succession, and even major reforms back to the silent destruction caused by syphilis in royal courts. The disease, once whispered about in dark corners, had shaped the fate of nations. But the legacy of syphilis among royals goes beyond history books. It serves as a reminder of vulnerability, secrecy, and the cost of denial. These rulers, who thought themselves untouchable, were undone not by armies or revolutions, but by an invisible affliction they tried to hide. Their desperation to mask the truth only made the suffering worse, ensuring that their downfall became even more humiliating when exposed. The story of syphilis in royal courts forces us to see history in a different light. Behind every grand portrait of a monarch painted in rich robes and jeweled crowns, there might have been a body riddled with pain, scars, and decay. Behind every confident gaze was perhaps a ruler haunted by disease, fear, and shame. Today, medical advancements mean syphilis can be treated with a simple antibiotic. But for royals of the past, it was a silent executioner, leaving kingdoms shaken and dynasties forever scarred. And so the question lingers: how much of the world we live in today was shaped not by kings' choices, but by the disease slowly killing them in secret? The silence of their suffering echoes through time. It reminds us that even the most powerful people in history were fragile, and that behind every crown lies a hidden story of pain.